All right. Reflections. And we are doing our reflection over the y-axis this time. So here's the y-axis. And we are flipping the direction. That's our reflections. So if we are flipping the direction, everything's either to the left or to the right of the line. And so A, if I flip it to the right, A was to the left, so now our new point is going to be 1 to the right. There's A prime. Remember, prime was used to distinguish which one's the old point, which one's the new point. B was 3 to the right of the line, so instead of being 3 to the right of the line, we're going to flip it and go 3 to the left of the line. There's B prime. So there is our reflection. So we're going to write out those coordinates. We had negative 1, 2 is going to go to A prime, which is at 1, 2. And B prime wound up at negative 3, 0. In general, if we're flipping over the y-axis, that means that x, y well, let's take a look at what happened with our x coordinates and our y coordinates. The x coordinates did change. The y coordinates moving up and down, well, A didn't move up or down, B didn't move up or down. So the x and y coordinates, the x coordinates change, the y coordinates stay the same. So the y coordinates don't have to do anything. The x coordinate changed. Instead of going, if it went to the left, now it went the same distance but to the right. If it went to the right, now it went the same distance but to the left. And so how do we describe that? We describe that by saying the numbers stayed the same, but it went a different direction. So how do we change the direction it goes? What we're going to change is the sign. And that'll make it go in a different direction. And you can see that in the coordinates. 3 became negative 3. Right? The sign changed to be negative. Negative 1, if I make that negative, it's going to be a negative negative 1, which is positive. Then the x-axis is going to be the opposite of that. So when we did the example yesterday where we flipped over the x-axis, instead of being above the line, it went below the line. Or if it was below, now it's above. So it didn't move to the left or right. The x-coordinate now can take the day off. It doesn't have to do anything. Now the y-coordinate is doing the work. It's the same number, except it's changing the sign. So that's how we get these coordinate rules for flipping over the x-axis, which you have on the previous page. And we're just going to focus on flipping over the x-axis and flipping over the y-axis. So xy moves to x negative y for the x-axis. Xy moves to negative xy for the y-axis. But I think the reflections are easier to think about by looking at the graph and saying we want to go the same distance but the other way. That's our flipping over the axis. Right? So those are reflections. Now we're going to focus today on rotations. So we've talked about translations where we're shifting up, down, left, right. We've talked about reflections where we're flipping. Now we're going to do rotations, which are turning the shape. And we can either turn clockwise or counterclockwise. Remember, clockwise is direction of the clock. Counterclockwise is the opposite direction from the clock. On our rotations, when we look at our coordinate rules for the rotations, they're going to be counterclockwise, turning the opposite direction. So when a point is rotated counterclockwise, here are our coordinate rules. And I just said that reflections are easier to think of with the graph. I think the rotations are easier with the coordinate rules. So that's how I'm going to show them. These are all coordinate rules for rotations counterclockwise. So let's do an example here. And don't forget, on your homework, you're going to need to write out the coordinates of the pre-image and the image. It's going to ask you that in your directions. So that means you need to actually write down these coordinates and show where they go. And we are rotating 90 degrees counterclockwise. So 90 degrees counterclockwise, we're going the opposite direction of the clock. So right now the shape is at about 3 o'clock. So if we rotate it counterclockwise, it should wind up around 12 o'clock. Going the opposite direction that the clock would go. So it should wind up at about 12 o'clock. So the shape should get rotated like this. That's about where our shape should end up. So our coordinate rule, if you look on the last slide, the coordinate rule for 90 degrees counterclockwise is xy moves to negative yx. It's showing it with a's and b's, but you can write it with x and y's as well. xy moves to negative yx. And so the idea of this coordinate rule is that you're going to switch x and y, and then that first coordinate, which is the new x coordinate, is going to get its sign changed. So switch x and y, and then that first coordinate gets its sign changed. So let's go through these. For r, to go to r prime, we're going to switch x and y. So 3, 1, switch it, becomes 1, 3. And then that first coordinate, which is now a 1, is going to get its sign changed. Now it's negative. Next one, to get to s prime. Watch it happen again. 5, 1, switch x and y. 5, 1 becomes 1, 5. And now that first coordinate, which is the new x coordinate, gets its sign changed. So instead of 1, now it's negative 1. Next one is t. To get to t prime, this one's a little bit different. We're still going to switch x and y. So 5, negative 3 becomes negative 3, 5. And then that first coordinate, the negative 3, it's going to get its sign changed. It was negative, now it's positive. Watch it one more time. U prime. 2, negative 1. Switch x and y. 2, negative 1 becomes negative 1, 2. And then that first coordinate is going to get its sign changed. So negative 1, 2. That first coordinate, instead of being negative 1, now it's positive 1. So let's put all those points on the graph. Negative 1 up to 1, 2, 3. This is r prime. Negative 1, and then up to 5 this time for the y coordinate. S prime. 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. D prime. And then U prime is going to be 1, 2. All right. Questions on that? Next. We're going to do one more of these. Most of this I'm going to ask you to do on your own. So I'm going to, I need to graph the points and get the coordinates written down. But here's what I want you to notice and think about while I write these down. Here's your food for thought here. I wanted to rotate 90 degrees clockwise. 90 degrees clockwise. Well, if I go back, all my coordinate rules are written as counterclockwise. So the question I want you to think about while we're getting these coordinates down is, how can we put 90 degrees clockwise in terms of going counterclockwise? How is 90 degrees clockwise going to relate to counterclockwise? So how can we put this in terms of counterclockwise? Well, if we look at the clock, let's say I started up at 12 o'clock. If I turn 90 degrees clockwise, that's going to be a quarter turn clockwise, and I'll end up at 3 o'clock. So I want to start at 12 o'clock and end at 3 o'clock. But I want to turn it the other way. So how far a turn do I need to make in order to turn the other way and wind up at 3 o'clock? Well, I would need to turn this way. There's 3 o'clock. So how far did I have to turn? Instead of a quarter turn, that's a 3/4 turn. So a 3/4 turn, well, 1/4 was 90, so we have 90, and then 180, and then another 90 would be 270. So 90 degrees clockwise is the same as 270 degrees counterclockwise. So a quarter turn in one direction is the same as a 3/4 turn in the other direction. Now we can make a coordinate rule, because 270 counterclockwise, we have the coordinate rule for. 270 counterclockwise, AB moves to B negative A. So that's going to be XY moves to Y negative X. So this time it's slightly different coordinate rule, but it's the same idea. We're still going to switch X and Y, but this time I'm going to switch X and Y, and the second coordinate is going to get its sign changed. The new Y coordinate is going to get its sign changed. So I'll do one of these, and then I'm going to ask you to do the other 3 on your own. So when you turn in the notes, I should see all 4 points written out and the entire shape drawn. Let's do K prime together. K prime says we're going to switch x and y. Switch x and y, so that means 3, 2 is going to become 2, 3. But then the second coordinate rule says the second coordinate, the new y coordinate, is going to get a sign change. It was positive, now it's negative. So K prime winds up at 2 down to negative 3. Here's K prime. So I want you to do the same thing to get to L prime, M prime, and N prime. So do these on your own. I want to see these when you turn in the notes. One more thing I'll tell you. There's going to be some problems where I'm asking you to describe a transformation. If you're asked to describe a transformation, I just want you to be specific. So what that means for a translation, where we're shifting up, down, left, right, I need how far and what direction. So all I'm saying here is if you have a translation, don't just say it's a translation. Tell me something like it's a translation and we're moving 2 units up and 4 units to the right. That's specific. Reflection. We're only talking about reflections over the x-axis and y-axis, so be specific about which axis we're flipping over. And then for a rotation, don't just say it's a rotation. Tell me which direction and how far. So that should be 90, 180, 270, counterclockwise. So make sure you describe what the translation, rotation, and reflection is. All right, I want to go back and give you a minute to